I'll show you an extract from someone who complied. Someone called Tina. This is from an extract with Kenny, who was the other long-term serving member of the team, and he was good friends with Beth. Okay? And he says, at first, Tina, the agency worker, came here as agency, and then I find out she has been made permanent and promoted to senior practitioner without being interviewed, which a lot of us are not happy about. When Beth was complaining about it, she said, I can't believe they've done that. It was never advertised. She has just literally been given a senior prac post on a plate. Well, I started laughing. I said, well, you know why they gave her that, don't you? It's because she just nods and smiles. So the belief was that if you complied and you followed the organisational directive, you would get promoted. But let's think about Tina and why she did this. Tina was an agency worker. She saw that they were getting rid of agency workers. Yeah? Resisting the organisational directive of not completing assessments in time and challenging that narrative meant that her job was insecure. Yeah? But complying, well, look what happened. She was made permanent and promoted. Okay? But it was around this time that the nod and smile term became popular within the team, but it spread around the organisation. And it referred to the way in which management expected frontline staff to toe a particular party line. Tina was promoted because she did meet performance targets without challenging management directives. The gold stars on the wall openly praised Tina for her performance and showed the senior managers when they came to visit the team that it could be achieved. So what was everyone else moaning about? Because someone could do it. It was possible to achieve desired targets despite the struggles other social workers were known to face. But the way that Tina achieved them probably wasn't as ethical as those managers, the senior managers, thought. Because what Tina used to do was take a support worker, and there were 2 support workers per team, and their role was to implement the child in need plans that were created by the social workers to accompany a case. But what Tina used to do was to take a support worker with her on a visit, and while she talked to the family, the support worker would make notes. When they came back to the office, the support worker would type up the assessment, Tina would read it and sign it off. So Tina was basically using the support worker as a personal assistant, which, according to Working Together 2015, is illegal because social workers are meant to be carrying out their own assessments, completing their own assessments, and developing an analysis that draws on their knowledge and training so that they are doing justice for the family that they are working for. Now, Debbie was aware that this was going on, but because it produced a good result, a good outcome, she turned a blind eye. And this had serious implications, because then what it did was, although it cast Tina in a good light, it cast Kenny and Beth in a darker light. Okay, they were seen as troublesome characters. Beth regularly challenged this practice, okay, and made it clear that she didn't approve of it. But when Beth got her 2 red stars and she was called to see the service unit manager, she refused to go. And she said, you owe me 30 days toil. Give me those 30 days and I will complete the assessments on time. But they refused to give it to her, and she was suspended with concerns for fitness to practice issues. Kenny challenged this decision and in a team meeting brought it up with the assistant team manager, saying that it was despicable and unacceptable. And this argument that developed in the team spilled into email, and he was sent an email from that assistant team manager saying, your cards are marked. And so what he did was, to flush it out, to make it open, he sent that email to all the service unit managers. And he said, do you see what's going on in this team? He didn't hear anything back. And a few weeks later, he was suspended for not following through a Section 47 investigation properly, concerns about his fitness to practice. So what did this mean for the rest of the team? Well, they could see that it had divided 2 areas, these binary positions that I was just talking about. They could see what happened to Tina, complying, blurring the boundaries, manipulating the rules so that she could comply, yeah, and effectively carry out the task. And for the others who resisted, what happened to them? Now, Goffman strongly believed that an overall objective of any team is to appear credible and competent. But to maintain appearance, it requires the whole team to over-communicate some facts and under-communicate the others. So the remaining members realised that by over-communicating facts and by Kenny telling the senior managers what was going on in this team, he had been seen as a turncoat, disloyal to the, the team rules, so to speak. And they all believed that it was because Kenny didn't nod and smile that he had been suspended. So what did they do? Well, they developed their own technique. And they came up with a team approach. So I'll read this out to you. So this is from Jane, another senior practitioner on the team. So she's telling me about the summons. Okay, and this is when you get summoned to a service unit manager when you haven't carried out your CP visits in time, your statutory visits. Our summons, it's like what we get at the end of each month if our team underperforms. We get a list from, she names the senior manager, summoning those who haven't completed their CP visits within timescale to the office. Me, no way, that's like you're at school. Jane, it's worse than that. If you get called in more than once, you're out. So we've started covering for each other. So no one gets called. I download the CP visits that are outstanding 1 week before the month's end, and then one of us does them all in one day. And we cover for the person whilst they're out. Me, have you thought of talking to someone about this? Jane, we've talked to the union about what has been going on, but they are no use. They don't understand what it means. It's just easier to nod and smile. So, as you'll all know, statutory provisions dictate that children who are subject to a child protection plan should be visited at least once every 4 weeks. This is one of the performance indicators that Ofsted examines during an inspection and therefore an area of concern for senior management in the local authority. With all social workers struggling to meet this target, senior managers have started calling in those who weren't reaching it. This meeting was referred to as a summons and represented the gravity of the situation, because if social workers were called more than once, then they were threatened with disciplinary procedures. Now, Goffman has suggested that an important element of team collusion is found in the system of secret signals, through which performers can surreptitiously receive or transmit pertinent information. These staging cues typically came from or to the director of the performance, who I think in this case was Debbie. The West team were fully aware that aggressive face work was at play, and both Beth and Kenny had challenged this protocol and were suspended. To prevent this happening to the rest of the team, Jane came up with a strategy that would protect them, that would see them meeting the legal requirements, the organisational needs, and to put on a good performance from when Ofsted arrived. And why are social workers, why aren't they challenging? I'll go back to that little caveat I gave earlier when I was watching that supervision where the manager said, you're now on the shame list and I'm going to have to report you. I interviewed both of them after that supervision, and the social worker, I said, how do you feel? Because I saw him go bright red. Accepted that that was the culture. And the manager felt terrible. But her manager was saying to her, you need to keep an eye on the performance of your team. Yeah? Meeting the needs of the system. Well, you were talking about Sue White earlier. She's written extensively about this connection to bureaucracy, but also the computer system, ICS. It dictates. The dominant narrative is what it tells you what is good practice, how to practice. In traffic lights. It's okay, I can see tonight, I'm in green. But no, I'm now in yellow, and I'm going to be in red. And this is dictated. I agree.
Well, I guess I was just reflecting, when we talk about all these things actually, and what that team came up in terms of covering themselves, you just think, well, where's the child in that?
Yes.
Yeah. I'm just sitting here listening and thinking, well, actually, so they did a visit, right? But actually, you know, what purposeful visit was that? You know, where was the child in that? What did that mean for that child or that family, having someone come, but actually who didn't know them? But I just think we're just, you know, performance data, absolutely, we have to have that, it has a purpose, but actually what does that mean for that child and that family? How does that support us to actually support them to get a better life if they're looked after in terms of what they had before when they were living in their family homes? Their birth family. You know, it's about using that to help us to improve practice, not to hit people over the head.
And the organisation that I'm observing at the moment, they had a new social worker arrive and they were really excited and they were saying, we love this social worker. Not only does she get assessments in on time, but she completes them well and she analyses well. She doesn't get to see the children and families that much, but you know, we can understand why. What it was it's what we were talking about, narratives and the perception and symbolic interactionism. From whose perspective? So you quite rightly pointed it out. Yeah, so here we have, it was meeting an organisational need. It was going to impress Ofsted, but what about the children and families? They didn't even know that this was wrong. Yeah? They didn't know that someone popping in going, right, 1, 2, 3, 4 children here, yep, done, thank you. Off to another visit, it's fine, seeing the children, they're there, was wrong. Because they don't know how our organisations function. Just to sum up then, so the main points. What do we take from this? Well, there's the invisibility of organisational culture. And when we're talking about invisibility, we come back to the regions, the regional performances, how that backstage became a front stage to serve a purpose for the cloak of competence, which then merged into the cloak of conformity. We've got this Machiavellian form of identity management, where people felt that they had to appear competent to conform to the organisational directives, using props and illusions in Goffman speak, manipulating legal requirements to suit their need. Who was it saying? It was saying so that they could appear a green social worker rather than a red social worker. Duping people into believing that this was the right thing to do. And we can understand everyone's own individual story. I hope I've tried to do that as I've gone along, to try and explain why Tina did what she did, why Debbie did what she did, why Kenny did it, why Beth did it, What I haven't touched on is why did the service unit managers do what they did? But who were they responding to, do you think? An organisation I think is mammoth and colossal in this social work world at this moment in time, and that's Ofsted. Feel it when they know an unannounced inspection is coming. But not only that, I've seen it take over life, just everyday working life, because they're doing audits. Auditing, giving social workers to audit. So there we've got the invisibility of organisational behaviour and the visibility of it as well. Who is it who was saying about seeing the wood for the trees, not seeing the gorilla? And also the olive, I love that bit, the olive and the pip. And how Beth and Kenny were looking at the whole olive and wanting to see the whole story of people, working with them as social workers should. And Tina going for the pip, and clutching on to being the green social worker. And then, but the way we could see this gorilla, if we stood back, was to see how these regions had blurred into one. This star chart was a massive sign. It meant something wasn't right, the moral line of discrimination. That was how it was blurred. How did she blur what was seen with what was purposefully overlooked? Senior managers were coming and they were seeing that star chart, and they were seeing that one person was getting gold stars and others were getting red. But thinking, rather than asking why and speaking to those social workers, turning it into a narrative that they liked, which was, well, one can do it, why can't the rest? And this is where we come to coercive power, Taylorism, that top-down, doing as you're told. That's what just nod and smile meant, was doing as you're told with minimum fuss. Rather than coactive power, doing it together and challenging upwards and going, this isn't right, what are we doing? We can't be doing this can't be right. But at the same time, it was the era of austerity. The golden era had gone. And the whole organisation was in identity crisis. But then what you came to, the most important part at the end of the day, are the children and families, and how this behaviour affected the service that they were receiving, because they didn't know. And that's the most shocking part of all of it, as we all get caught up in our organisational cultures and ideologies and think that we're doing the right thing, convincing ourselves that it is the right thing when potentially it's morally wrong.